Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Leona Bergstrom, and Richard introduced us at the beginning. Welcome to Reignite Third Calling Conversations. And wow, we are so excited today because we have really dear friends joining us who have deeply impacted not only our lives, but people all around the world in their ministry. John and Jackie Colomb are joining us from Southern California. And we first met them, we knew of them in Santa Barbara in the early 70s when they were in ministry there. But the Lord has just brought our paths together over the years, mostly in serving midlife and older adults. And John and Jackie have led the way in that for many of us, but we've served on boards together, and we've spoken together, and we've prayed together, and we've cried together over what it is God is doing in the ministry of older adults. But so welcome, John and Jackie Colomb.
Thank you. Great to see you, to be with you.
Thanks. You guys have been in the pastorate, you've been in education. Jackie's been a teacher for many years, led the way in intergenerational ministries. But before we get into the nuts and bolts, we do know that you're also grandparents. And tell us a little bit about that. How many, where are they, and how old are they?
I can't remember their names.
That's why we have Jackie with us.
I just wrote down a name a minute ago, reminding us to sing to Brian today. He turns 18 today. But yeah, we have two boys. One is an LA City fireman and one is a pastor. And they each have 4 children. Not a bad return for 2 boys, would you say? So yeah, they range in age from 20 down to 12. And one comes from Ethiopia, one of our 16-year-olds. They adopted Sion when she was 7. So we have 8 grandchildren. And I will say too, I don't know, we'll probably touch on this later, but it's really a different season when they're 20 down to 12 than when they were little tykes. And we just spent 3 days with the Apple Valley kids taking care of them while their parents went to a staff retreat. They're very capable of staying by themselves, but mom and dad didn't want them alone too many nights. And it gave us time to be with just those 4. And I thought, how different than when we used to go up there and take care of 4 little itty bitty tykes. And but to just have that time with the teenagers over the last few days.
In fact, Jackie and I have just recently been talking about maybe having another child just so we could get some new.
He jests as usual.
Let us know how that goes.
As Howie Stevenson used to say, if I'd known grandparenting was going to be so great, I would have had the grandkids first. But no,
we do miss those little years, the little tykes. But boy, there's a new chapter with the teenagers also, and it's terrific as well.
And the prayers are more intense as they grow up in this world, which we'll talk about in a moment. But wow.
Cool. So now you're on a new chapter. Yeah. Go ahead.
Tell us about the Legacy Coalition and what your involvement is in that.
Well, our ministries, we've been in ministry. Well, we've been married 53 years and we've been in ministry 53 years. No, 56 years.
Well, yeah.
So we started when we were young in youth ministry, when we went to Santa Barbara there. And then midway through that, we realized we've got to make a difference in the home if we're going to make a difference in the kids' lives, the youth, the young people. And so we moved into family ministry and with the idea that you'll hire a youth pastor so we can work together. Because my concerns back then, Dick and Leona, was a lot of the fruit fell off the tree. And if you go to the root of the problem, it's also the root of the solution, help mom and dad in the home. So we started with marriage tune-up weekends, then parent tune-up weekends, and loved family ministry. as our family grew. And then as we got older, we were invited to come down to EB Free Fullerton in Fullerton, California, to head up the senior adult ministry. So for 31 years, we did that. But midway realized, as we always struggled with CASA, that we worked together in Christian Association of Senior Adults, what do you call these people? And we always struggled, and no one wanted to be called a senior adult anymore, except to get all the senior discounts. And so we began to focus on intergenerational ministry. I became the intergen pastor because I thought titles do matter in a church where communication sometimes is not as good as it needs to be. Or what does that mean? It's a strange word. And we just kind of stepped into the Apple scene and called it's a small I, so that the younger grandparents would say, "Oh, that's like iPhone." Intergen. And we did that until we retired in June of 2019. Back to the first question, Dick. Legacy Coalition, Jackie and I were invited by Larry and Diane Fowler, who had been a part of Awana back in Chicago. God had put on his heart grandparents. It was on our hearts and had been part of our ministry, though we couldn't jumpstart it back 20 years ago. It wasn't ready. And so then we went back to Chicago, sat around a table with a group of people, and realized God was calling us to this. One of the younger guys, Josh Mulville Hill, was working on his dissertation, began to look at all the scriptures that have to do with grandparenting, and realized we missed it. All of our focus was on parenting. And just because the word grandparent only appears in the scriptures twice, we just kind of ignored. We forgot about the word generations. We forgot about children's children, children yet to be born. And so Josh did his dissertation, turned it into a book. And we realized, God was calling us to mobilize and motivate and educate Christian grandparents to do more than just be glorified babysitters or people who bail out the kids or the grandkids, to really share their life story, to share God's story, to be intentional of passing on more than just information, but character and the lessons that we learned the hard way, so that our kids wouldn't have to repeat and learn. It's pretty painful and expensive to learn the hard way. Psalm 78, teach these things to your children and your children's children. And then it has this indictment, so they won't be like you, a stubborn, stiff-necked generation. And the whole idea is God wants us to create not just people, children and grandchildren, but to recreate them. And the only way you can do that is model and live it and speak it and be focused on it. He wants us to be, you all of our listeners probably understand this word. He wants us to be Xerox, better than the original, instead of carbon copies.
Interesting.
So anyway, that's Legacy. We've been going for 5 years, and there's a Zoom call I have in a few minutes when we're done here. There'll be about 20 people around the country. Every week we begin with prayer and just refocusing. I'm thrilled with it because it's a God-centered, Christ-centered, God-honoring group of people with integrity like you can't believe. And God has just shown favor, great favor.
Well, that's exciting, because I know we traveled with you for many years through the Christian Association of Senior Adults, or Serving Adults as it became known, and just continuing to try to gather momentum around that agenda. It seems like Legacy Coalition has been raised up as God, in God's appointed hour, for such a time as this. And so tell us a little bit more about what you mean by, you've touched on this really, but intentional grandparenting is key to this. What does that phrase mean?
I love the way Jay Kessler who was president of Youth for Christ International and then later Taylor University. And he was a great mentor to all of us doing youth work way back. And I remember one time Jay was talking about there are really three kinds of truths. You've got propositional truth, where you've got, you know, the scriptures, you've got this Bible stories, scripture memory, and those things. And the doctrines, which I think are going to be more, I mean, it sounds like a stuffy word, but if we're not indoctrinated, someone will indoctrinate us. If we don't know who our God is and who we are as people and who we are not, if we don't know the spiritual realms around us, if we don't know that we have giftedness in the spirit and that the scriptures are from God and how they got to us, and if we don't understand the church, and by the way, legacy, our primary thing is to work through the church, which is pretty beat up right now. But what was the question?
Intentional.
Oh yeah. Squirrel.
Intentional, yeah.
Yeah,
Intentional.
squirrel is right.
Propositional truth.
I'm here for a reason.
Oh yeah, for more than one reason.
And then you have relational truth, you know, Philippians 4, the things that you have learned and seen and heard in me. Three areas, things you have learned, heard, and seen in me. So you've got propositional truth, you have relational truth, that they're watching us. They're watching us as we go out out of the store, and whether or not we got overpaid, and whether we'll go back and say, I think you made a mistake, or if we'll lie about ages when it comes to theater with the grandkids. And then you have incarnational truth, where, I mean, they say it part of our lives and the fabric of our heart. It's not just words. It's not just Sunday. So intentionally praying, Lord, how do I communicate to these kids that you and young adults, older adults you brought into my life? And of course, a real major byproduct are their parents. And we know that so many of our grandkids' parents have strayed from the truth. Many, well, didn't we all grow up in a very graceless, legalistic church? And I'm grateful for the things that I was protected from. But some people felt that, I mean, let's face it, were movies, did you really not want Jesus to find you in a theater if he came back? Would it have really harmed anyone if I put those nasty playing cards in the spokes of my bike? If I danced or played in the jet? I mean, you get the drift. And they reacted against it because we were graceless. Now we've come into grace, but now we've gone the other direction. We forget that there are standards too. And there are other passages that say, hey, evaluate the situation. Is it really worth what it's going to cost for you to do this? And everyone's watching. So intentional just means thinking about it instead of, well, we're going to go to Disneyland. We're going to babysit the kids and bring them gifts. We're going to take them out to nice places and to good places to eat. It's so much more than that. And I don't think that's what the kids will remember. They'll remember when our lives fall apart, who we lean on.
So, yeah, Jackie, I was going to flip it over to you.
Yeah.
Oh, you had a comment first before I do
Well,
that,
I was
Jackie?
going to say the main thing is to have a plan. You know, it isn't just inviting the kids over to spend some time. Yes, that's important. But I think one thing I've really learned, I've learned it from John as well as from Legacy Coalition, and that is to have a plan. And I thought about this even when I mentioned we were up in Apple Valley for a few days with the older kids, but I was constantly thinking, you know, how do we pull out of these kids some of the things that we've been wondering about them? But so my mind is always thinking, what questions are we going to ask them? What stories of ours are we going to share with them? But the main thing is not just babysitting, but and in our case, just being a presence in the house with the kids. But what plan do we have? And while we were there, we did celebrate an 18th birthday. And we wanted to take him to dinner after his track meet. And we had kind of a crazy situation where we had to wait over an hour for our food. Long story.
And you know, when you get this old, you know, time really is important.
But anyway, but in that hour, we chose to bless. We thought, well, okay, here we are. Even though we're in a restaurant, it was a quiet place. And
except for the 4 drunk ladies across the way.
Well, they had a little much, but anyway.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh dear, what was
We
I
blessed
saying?
them. We were blessed them.
Anyway, we said, well, this isn't a wasted time. This will be our time to bless Brian. And so we ask each of the kids to say a word of blessing to Brian. Well, within that time came all kinds of stories from those kids, as well as we were able to share some stories about our past, about where we are right now. And so constantly thinking, how are we best going to speak into our kids?
You know, one of the things that we've done, I can't remember how many years, 8 or 9 years, we had Camp Grammy and Papa. We get the kids, I guess they'll always be kids no matter how old they are, but for 3 days. And part of the being intentional is we would always sit down with the kids' parents, and you know, thank God our sons and their wives they love the Lord and have blessed us to be able to bless their kids and speak into their lives spiritually. So, you know, what are your concerns for each of the kids? What are your prayer requests? Okay, well, we better talk about respect then. We better talk about trust and fears, emotions, and then developed a curriculum, loosely a curriculum, but a lot of object type lessons and fun events to teach those truths for those 3 days. And so anyway, the thinking through, like Jackie said, and she's so good at the planning part of, okay, well, what are we going to do? Well, are you sure we have enough time to do that? And
but I will say that in the years that we've done Camp Grammy and Papa, there's another place where we really learned about having a plan. And John mentioned a curriculum, and coming from the classroom myself, you know, you always are thinking about the curriculum and how are we best going to present it to the kids. And so John is so good about that because he's so creative. I can fix their favorite foods. I, you know, have the place ready for them and the surprises and so forth. But then together we can be a little bit more creative in the curriculum. And what are we going to teach it? We laugh over this because every year we have something different, but we said, how many times have we touched on respect? You know, constantly we're going back to respect. Do you remember what we said before? So there are things that keep coming around. And
yes. And so you're re-engaging, it sounds like. I don't know how isolated you were from your grandchildren during the pandemic, but like a lot of grandparents, they were amongst the early vaccinated people after first responders, and they've been able to begin to hug their grandchildren and celebrate a bit. How do you see people and yourselves re-entering your grandchildren's lives after periods of separation, and how is that different than the last year?
wow.
You know, I do think it all took me by surprise. You know, even though you know you're in the middle of it, but it didn't dawn on me really how it was going to affect our time with family. But our kids became very protective, especially one one of our daughter-in-laws was particularly overprotective for us. And so even the kids that live close by, we didn't see much of them. And the kids in Apple Valley, they visited a couple of times coming in. Corey always had a plan. We'll come in the side gate. We'll meet you on the patio. I'll have my wipes ready to clean anything we touch.
Kids won't come in the house.
The kids won't come in the house, and I found myself saying, really? But then you hear about other people who didn't even see any of their kids for the full year or more. We did a couple of times play games on Zoom. Wasn't our best.
Calvin cheated.
But it gave us a touch point.
Yeah.
And so it just absolutely took me by surprise. And then when Corey decided maybe we won't have Christmas this year. Really? I hadn't thought that far. I honestly, I don't know if my head was in the sand. I don't know, but that surprised me. As it turns out, we did have a day of Christmas on the patio. We brought food in because I wasn't going to cook. They didn't want me to cook anything. And again, the protection just continued throughout. But, it ended up being a great day on the patio, and they were going to stay a couple of hours, but they stayed the entire day. And so now that everything has opened up again, then you think, okay, I've never been so glad to be at a baseball game or a track meet or.
Well, and cross country. Where is he? Oh,
yeah.
Well, that's over.
We drove all the way to Apple Valley to see cross country, and then you see, there he is.
Yeah, that's a tough sport to follow an individual.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's been a challenging year, and I would add this: filled with fear, anxiety around the country. I mean, it's just and no place to really take off your mask and let the emotion out. I mean, I think it's been a tough. Well, I don't have to tell anyone here. I don't care if you're in Sweden.
That has been true around the world, and we felt that here in our relationship to our families and our grandchildren for not being together in a home for over a year, but thankfully able to do some outdoor activities, gathering for a walk in the park, in the woods, different things that we came up creatively to do. Some Zoom, yes, definitely some Zoom calls that helped all of us connect, just like now, didn't it? And going forward, just coming out to we did a vacation together for the first time with one of our grandchildren families. And so that was just very meaningful to actually let down the guard, take off the mask, be able to hug and actually spend time in the same room. It's been a very challenging year, as we all know.
Our kids did say that it's been the greatest thing for their families.
Really? Yeah.
It slowed them down.
It slowed them down because of all the games and the activities and the concerts and the blah, blah, blah. To be able to huddle around a table and not get dressed early in the morning on weekends and enjoy each other and talk. And so it's had some benefits as well. And I think it's going to cleanse the church in one sense as well.
Yeah. And in slowing down bike rides, just with that they did many more things.
And now they're starting to restart these things like soccer, baseball, football, gymnastics, and parents like in our families are trying to figure out how to juggle even working from home, school only 2 days a week, live and in person, if that. And so now maybe by fall, they're going to get back into the classroom. But for families juggling that, it's very difficult.
Oh, that was very hard. Yeah.
I'm going to kick it back to Leona to talk about how maybe we've changed or some other things.
I know everybody on here has a different story, and some people's grandchildren are far away, some are close. Everybody has a different experience. But I do know one thing in common is we all did change in this year, whether it's our perspective about, as you just said, slowing life down a little bit. What does that mean? But I am concerned, as many are, with some of the deep changes in our grandchildren, particularly teenagers. As I talk to my friends who are grandparents of teenagers, what went on in their hearts? Were you use the word fearful? Were they way back to the beginning, like you said, Jackie? They were afraid they were going to kill their grandmother, if they
Yeah.
hugged, and that was very fearful from that for our kids. What do you see as you work with both the youngers and the grandparents? What has changed in us in this year? Not just the pandemic, but all of the social unrest that we've been through, the political struggles, the racial injustice issues. All those things have come into our thinking and our dialogue. That's a big question. What changed in all of us?
I think the world turned upside down.
Mm-hmm.
Things we took for granted, we no longer do. Like, is fellowship a luxury or is it a necessity? What is fellowship? I mean, it's so much more than a donut and a cup of coffee. It's we were with a group of folks last night. They said it's been a year since we've gathered in our backyard with anyone. And they said it's been a long time since we laughed. And I think, there's enough tears from this season or from any season of life. And if there's not a place for laughter or to let it out and to express it, and even with full face, full heart, the face and the heart go together. And when you can't see what's going on, I think you become a little less human. And then, of course, it's not, these things are no longer for online dating. They're online worship, they're online shopping, they're online learning and education. I mean, people are tired of this, though. For things like this, I love it. I mean, I have about 5 Zoom calls a week, and it sure saves time and energy and effort to be able to, and you get right to it. You got the clock going. There's an agenda, and so I think relationships. People are starving for the relationship. They're starving for answers to their huge questions about life. They're asking questions they assumed. Their government, leadership, trust, finances, and the church. With our grandkids, youth group isn't what it used to be. And here they are trying to learn how to socialize and get beyond that stage of being uncomfortable eating anything in front of the opposite sex, just trying to navigate their way through what is the relationship and a good one. And now it's time will tell what it's done. And I'm sure psychologists and sociologists will write it up. But I think the church could really be at the front here to lead the way when we get back to the new normal. And I have wondered about the mega church and its future. People have been eating a lot of troughs, and they've found new kinds of teaching, and some have strayed to cultural teaching that buys into the new moral code of our day and age. Go ahead.
I was just going to say our kids are going to go to camp this summer.
Yeah.
And one set of our kids will do a missions trip to Mexico. And there is a new excitement there because they missed everything last year. And so I think they really are even more, they've always loved what they did with the youth group, but I think in particular this year, there's much more excitement. Another thing, one of our high schoolers came home from a meeting with a group of her friends, and the whole idea of transgender and that topic came up. And she said, "Mom, I felt kind of like I was out there alone, their ideas were different than my ideas. And so when her mom said, well, what did you say? She said, I didn't say anything, because I thought, whatever I say, I think it's going to be the wrong thing. And there were friends that she was surprised at what they believe now. And others, okay, I'm on the same track with them. So, they're having to adjust to new topics that I think they haven't had to deal with, just like we are in the past. But it's hard for a teenager. And then to know, when can I speak up? When should I speak up? How do I speak up? Because I don't want to put a wedge between myself and my friend. Can we talk and not have a wedge between us? So,
Yeah, and to add one more thought there, even those who are leading our young people in the church are questioning all the values. The price tags have changed. And what they used to speak about as these are the standards that God has for us, those lines are starting to be erased or get blurred. And boy, I think if there's one thing we need to speak into our own peer group, as well as our children and our grandchildren. And we don't have a lot of power in those areas. We don't come in and say, no, you will. No, we're invited in or not, but we have to speak into them courage and truth. And we got to live it. They're very sensitive about authenticity. Does this stuff work for you? Or are they just words?
Well, there's certainly no lack of conversation topics as we come out of this year. And they're real springboards, as you're saying, for in-depth conversation. I had one friend ask me, how do I just ask those questions? How do I begin to, I think she used the word, how can I be curious about their lives?
Without being snoopy.
Well, yeah. So what do you say to that?
Well, you write letters every week to the grandkids.
I do.
Snail mail. You put a stamp and then
how does
someone
that
delivers
work?
it to the house after they've cleansed it.
The old-fashioned way.
You write to them every week.
Well,
talk about that.
Not all 8 of them, 2 a week. So the 2 oldest ones have the first week of the month. Then the next one's the second week. So each child is getting a note from me once a month. Does that make sense? Yeah. So each week I'm writing to somebody different. And they're not long, lengthy letters. They're, I would call them more notes. I just share with them what we've been doing. Maybe if God has shown me something, I will tell them about it. But I do ask questions, but I don't always get an answer back. Let's be honest. So, I have asked several questions, even if it has to do with what are you doing? What school did you decide to go to next year? What friends are you going to be with? Those kinds of things. Once in a while, I get a text that will refer to the note. But the better conversation, of course, comes when they're in person. And of course, you're right, knowing how to ask the question without seeming nosy, but just we are curious. We just kind of like to keep up with them, right?
We pray for each of the kids. They each have their day, and then their parents, we lump them together on one of those days. But and of course, having 8, we lump those kids together, pray for 2 on a day sometimes. But I think intentionally praying, saying, God, would you show me? Would you give an opportunity? Will you open the door for us to walk in regarding this or that? And I think asking a question, and I'm not good at this, listening,
Listening.
and then listening, and even waiting, even though the silence may be uncomfortable. And, keep looking at them. If you're in person doing this, what do you think, honey? What's going through your mind? Another thing that we have used, playing games, the families, both sides love to play games, table games. And those are great conversation pieces or places. And you get to see character too, especially when they're playing Monopoly. Find out if they're stealing rent or throwing a home on their or hotel. But another thing that we've used, we took this up. I don't know if you can see it. Does it say table topics? And this is for family gathering table topics, questions to start great conversations. What 3 adjectives would your family use to describe you? These are random. What do you love about where you live? Which of your family members do you go to for advice, adventure, laughter, or acceptance? These are for family, but then they have them for teenagers. How many texts did you make this week? I imagine in here is probably, have you ever milked a cow or wrung a chicken's neck? And then this one is, or had a Red Bull. This one is grandparents and grandkids. And this just came yesterday. I haven't looked at it yet. These come from, well, I just went online, Table Topics, tabletopics.com. And which song makes you want to dance no matter what? A question is, if you find a good question, and when we started this, was it Sunday, we laid them out at the table.
Mm-hmm.
When we started them, the kids got into it. And so I think letting them even choose a question, or they can pass and say, you can maybe say you can pass 2 questions off to someone else, but you have to take one. I think any of these kind of things are very helpful tools to get down to, and of course it has to be a safe place.
I think too, one thing I've had to come to grips with and to accept, just like we're all different, all 8 of the grandkids they're all different. And so you may have a talker over here who will tell everything, and but then someone over here, no, they're much more reticent. They'd rather be in their room alone, or they're much more of an introvert. Or so accepting the personality of the child. Okay, I'm probably not going to get much out of Morgan, not like Thompson loves to talk, it's just different. But put those 2 together, those cousins together,
chatter
and chatter is right. Yeah.
So then try to listen in.
So
and I was thinking of Sion Hope, our sweetheart from Ethiopia, and I've tried to get her to talk about the orphanage. I've talked to other Ethiopians who said, they won't talk about those things, And I was thinking, Lord, is there a way that maybe I could take her there? We could go on a mission trip or something, so we could take her back to her roots. Maybe you would call her back to this country for some kind of ministry, or at least to know how to pray, or to remember what God has done in her life, to take her bring her into a family. I don't know. And I think we just keep trying, like with our own lives, a lot of things we don't know, but Lord, guide us, lead us, open our eyes, open our ears, open the path. Here's
where we have to study the child.
Yeah.
What ticks him off, what makes him tick, it just, we have to know the child to know how far we can go with them, or how deep the questions are or not, and what will be used.
It takes
to
trust,
bring them out,
and it takes the right setting.
Yeah,
you have to get them alone almost.
And then you have a serendipity like we had, John referred to Sunday, I mean, we were all having Panda Express together after we had all taken a hike and the kids had fished and so forth. And he pulled out the questions and I thought, oh dear, I don't know if this is the time. We're kind of droopy after today.
I just
boy,
put him in the middle of the table
Yeah.
and I just, what's that?
But the kids picked up on it immediately, and some great fun things, as well as more poignant points came out. But so every once in a while, you just have a serendipity and you cling to that and think, okay, that was a good one.
That's great. That's great advice. I remember I have one very, very, very active grandson who doesn't sit still, very curious all the time.
After Dick, huh?
Yeah, very cute. And I took him to the local gardens once on a walk, and we were slowing down a great deal. And he found this little trail of ants that was going by, and he studied it. And then he looked up and he said, Nanny, you really can see a lot of things when you slow down.
Oh.
And I thought, okay, yes, like you said, a moment. If I had told him, let's go slow down.
Yeah.
When it worked, but it was precious moment. Yeah. Very serendipitous.
To us as well.
Yes. Most lessons
I remember we were in Santa Barbara and both of our little boys then, who were in the mid-40s now, were in the front yard. We were in the back and we heard them yell, Mom, Dad, come quick. We ran. What's going on? Look at the sunset. It's beautiful. And we realized we've been going too fast.
Yeah.
To be able to see through their own eyes. Yeah.
So John and Jackie and Leona were coming up on 3/4 hour. I'm gonna open it up for any questions that our viewers and listeners have. They are free to unmute at this point and either audio and or video and ask any questions of you just to get clarification on some points. So is anybody out there that wants to unmute themselves?
Or share your own story. Or
Share your
ask a question or share
we
a
learn from
story.
each other.
Sue and Shell from Sweden. Solentuna checking in.
Yeah, we haven't seen our grandchildren. And so we've had weekly meetings online where we make a specific time every week. And we usually send a text to say, have you remembered that we're going to have some time? And I've had a story time going. It's like a series. Did you say that in Swedish, in English? Where it keeps on going, doesn't stop.
Mm-hmm.
And we started many years ago, and this has been really good to follow this story. And I use little soft toys that are the basis for the story. But now our biggest one, she's 10, or was it the other one? Anyway, they didn't think they wanted to have that story anymore. So we've been trying to think what kind of things we could do to stimulate conversation, and really appreciate your ideas. Those table topics sound a good thing. We did decide to try and do a quiz, and we tried to find questions that was appropriate for a 10 and a 7 and a 5-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Worked sometimes doing drawings, trying to sort of stimulate the conversation, because the kids are going in and out and they're interrupting one another, and sometimes you feel you've had a good conversation, sometimes it's just chaotic. And they're turning somersaults and, just freaking out and not listening at all. So we're trying to do that. Yeah.
Chaos.
Well, our poor kids, I heard of one of the grandchildren. In fact, Larry Fowler's 3 of his grandkids come to his house every day while we're doing Zoom calls. So I think they've got 4 or 5 computers going. And the little kindergartner, after an hour online, started to cry, I can't do this anymore. Those little ones are supposed to run and play. Kindergarten was a place to play in the garden. And so I would say time, you've got a window of time, and the clock is ticking with the little ones, even 10-year-olds. and they've gotten used to the Zoom where it's not new and novel anymore. But you could even do let's make up a story. And okay, once upon a time there was a little boy whose name was, then the next person
Oh, right.
takes
Yeah.
it and says,
Yeah.
But
that's
is
a good
that
thing.
kind of what you were doing?
Not really. I was doing the story, but of course it was an interactive story, and I was saying, well, what do you think this guy is going to do now?
Okay. Yeah. Mhm.
But that's an idea to flip over the storyline to somebody else.
And then they contribute. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
do they speak English?
Mhm.
No, the ones here in Sweden speak Swedish, and the other ones are living in India, and they speak English.
Mm.
There's a series out called The Chosen.
Oh, yes. We've
And,
seen it.
you could maybe say, hey, take a look at that and then let's talk about it next week.
Mhm.
And maybe give them some questions.
Now they've got younger ones though. You go 10 down to 5.
Right. And
Right.
even the ones in India are from 7, 5, and 2. They're small.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking The Chosen is wonderful, but
Mhm.
I wonder
It's
if it
more
would
mature, yeah.
I wonder if it would be a little bit too old
A bit too
for,
old.
for
Mhm.
the kiddos. What do you
Yeah.
think, Mona? Have you seen The Chosen? Yeah.
Yes, I have
Mhm.
seen it, and it
I-
is amazing, but it
It
is probably
may-
older. Yeah.
But I think maybe, yeah, in that case, yeah.
I agree with what the kids do on Zoom. They do these crazy backgrounds and poofs and
Yeah.
faces, and it's crazy trying to get them to hold still. But I
Let-
love what you're thinking of a story. Have you used the story cubes? Those are kind of fun
Oh,
too,
yeah.
that give you an emblem and then they make up a story about some
You
little
roll it and then whatever's
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
How
Yeah.
you do that on Zoom, I'm not sure, but
Let
Okay,
me
where do you
just
get
say-
those?
Oh yeah, where do you get those? She said.
I'll go look it up while you're
Okay.
solving.
But I just
you can
appreciate what you're doing. I'm just so touched by the fact that you started one way and you're trying other things
Yeah.
as you see the kids changing. And
Mm,
that's called intentional. Yeah. That's
yeah.
it.
Well, of course, we're looking forward to the summer. The family from India are coming home in June. And then we have to try and get together with the family in the north of Sweden. It's going to be quite a logistic thing to do, but
Uh-huh.
it's going to be quite an adventure. And
Yeah.
by that time, we'll be fully vaccinated.
Uh-huh.
So we're very pleased about that.
Yeah.
So delightful to hear from Sue and Shell, who hosted us in Sollentuna, just outside of Stockholm, a couple different times maybe 3 times while we were touring there from 2012 to 2014. Anyone else have a question for John and Jackie? We're going to stick to our limit of 1 hour because John has another Zoom meeting after this. So
yes, I
log
have
in if you have
Can
one.
you hear me? Can you hear
Yes,
me?
we can.
Carolyn.
Hi, Carolyn.
Okay, I can't put the video on because
That's all right.
I think you have stopped it at your end.
Mhm.
But this is a great big shout out to Sue and Shell because I didn't realize they'd be on this webinar, and Sue is my sister.
Oh my goodness. Well,
So, hey Sue, lovely to. Oh, I can start my video now.
There
I
you
can say
go.
hello to her.
There you go.
Is
Oh,
this-
wonderful.
I did not know they'd be on this webinar. Hello, sweetie.
I
And,
see,
And,
I see the
Carolyn.
similarities.
I love it. I love it.
And
Yeah.
where are you,
So
Carolyn?
my question, my
Carolyn's in Canada.
In Canada.
yes, I'm in Canada.
Yeah.
My question is, we have 3 grandkids who are with a Christian family and 1 who is just 9 months old, who do not have Christian parents. And what advice can you give us apart from praying, being on your knees?
It's hard, isn't it?
Praying and being hard on your knees. I think as you're praying, we don't pray in a vacuum. The Lord begins to, I wish the Lord would just do what we tell them to do.
Are they closed to you sharing anything?
Well, our daughter, no, but her husband, they're pretty closed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that adds
yeah.
another layer to it. We've had
Yeah.
friends who have said, you can spend time with our kids, but if you talk to them about your God, then you will not have time with them. So that's why I asked
Tell them about Shirley.
how closed they are. We had a friend whose kids said that exactly to her, you know, we don't want you sharing anything. And she took her on a trip to New York. And on that trip, to make a long story short, the little girl who was 13, I think, left her brand new camera in a taxi. And they got back to the hotel and she realized it. And she said, well, Grandma, I mean, my lucky stars, maybe we'll get it back. And Shirley took the opportunity to say, well, I am going to pray about it.
Let's pray about it right now.
Let's pray about it. And that's all that she said. But within how many hours? 2 to 3 hours. By that evening, the camera was back. There are 17,000 taxis in New York City. And through, you know, all these.
Someone got conviction when they realized I better not steal this.
Yeah, somebody took it, felt convicted, called the company, said, I have a camera, I need to report.
And they delivered it to the hotel.
So that little girl learned something without Grandma saying lots, but she certainly saw the power of prayer. But anyway, I know some of our folks are in that dilemma where they just are not allowed to say anything if they want contact with the children.
What I could do is just simply ask them. I can tell them we pray for your daughter, 9 months old. But do you mind if we pray over her when she's with us, or sing songs to her, or talk to her, and as she gets older, and just ask their input on it.
Right. Get it out there in the open so that,
I mean,
you don't want to jeopardize anything. And yet you want to say, you want to speak into
and
them.
the facts are, someone's going to speak into her life, some kind of faith. Someone's going to speak into her life who made this world and which God. I mean, there are a lot of gods out there. You know, they may be reacting more to what they experienced growing up in the church. And but and to marshal some other prayer warriors with you. And to remember, I think our prayers have a life, eternal shelf life, even beyond us being here. I think if the Lord bottles up our tears, he bottles up our prayers.
This is Cindy. If I could, I'm sorry, I can't video.
Would you like to video? I can give you the opportunity.
It doesn't make a difference.
Okay.
But I just wanted to make sure you could hear me.
Yes,
but I think one of the things that we really have been focusing on is, you know, during our third calling is what is God calling us in this time as grandparents? And now we're great grandparents. And we just got to have that little great grandbaby with us for a whole week with her parents. So, so yes, time does go quickly, and what we've invested in over the years, it's so wonderful to see. But what I wanted to say is the balance of sharing what God is doing in our lives, not only with our grandchildren and wanting to know what they're doing, but also the wonderful opportunities God is providing to us and the joy that comes from that. And just sharing that nonchalantly with our grandchildren, with our children, that those seeds are definitely planted and God blesses that, I believe, by uniting our families and helping to build legacy.
One of the things that we've been intentional in those awkward situations, like you were just discussing, where you're not sure how far to go or what to say exactly or how to initiate, is just we all have a testimony, and we can just witness little small things, and that's not that's not intimidating.
That's great advice.
Thank you.
That's
Yes,
great
thank you
advice.
for that.
Everybody has had great input, and we're so glad we could have a little family reunion here, Carolyn and Sue. That is awesome.
Wonderful.
But we are coming to the end of our time, which we want to honor all of your time. Quickly, John, tell us how to access any resources from Legacy. How, if anybody has any further questions for you, is there a way that they can contact?
Oh yeah, and we do have a lot of, pardon?
Yeah, she wasn't quite finished with her
I'm sorry.
question.
Oh, that's good. Just tell us how to get resources and answers.
We have a lot of good resources
Okay.
on these things. Long distance grandparenting, Wayne Rice wrote a book on that. Larry wrote one on the prodigal grandchild. But if you go to legacycoalition.com, that'll take you to our website, legacycoalition.com. Every Monday night, except May 31st on Memorial Day weekend, we have a webinar for 1 hour, and we've brought on people like John Stonestreet from Colson Ministries, Gary Chapman from Love Languages, you name it, for an interview time just like this to talk about grandparenting issues. And it's 5 o'clock here Pacific Coast time, but if you go to grandmondaynights.com and sign up, grandmondaynights.com. That'll let you in. You can register. And then if you want to see the replay, if the time doesn't work for you at that moment, you can see it for the rest of the week on grandmondaynights.com/replay. And then we've just added a podcast. We just started 6-7 weeks ago. Wayne Rice, Larry Fowler, and I take 20 minutes or so of a speaker from one of our conferences. This last one we did was Tony Evans. And then we talk about it. Today I'll be doing one with Jay Kessler. We'll talk about something he gave back at Focus on the Family. Gary Chapman's, not Gary Chapman, Crawford Loritz, Josh McDowell, Chuck Swindoll. Those are all on, what did I say to get to the podcast? Oh, it's if you go to Spotify or any of those and look up Legacy Coalition, it should come up. But if you want to get to it from our site, go to https:// actually, you just need legacycoalition.com/podcast. legacycoalition.com/podcast. And then we have a conference coming up in October in Birmingham, Alabama. And we'll be simulcasting in churches. I think we're up to about 50 churches around the country and the world, South Korea, Greece, and other places, Australia. God is just showing favor. We're just absolutely amazed how he's, for such a time as this. It's kind of where CASA left off, you guys. When we finished CASA, we thought, Lord, what is next? And this seems to be what's next. And instead of trying to figure out how to do senior adult ministry, grandparenting is the average age of a first-time grandparent's 47. So
Wow.
we don't have to label anyone anymore.
Right.
Give them
Well,
time.
thank you for being with us on this reignite.net webinar where we interview famous people like John and Jackie Colon.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us. Richard, you want to close us?
And we will post this on our website, re-ignite.net, under a certain heading. You can find it on that website. there's several back there. In fact, the Goffs have one on marriage, and that's posted. And so we look forward to future webinars. Stay tuned. We'll be signing off. So thanks for joining us on this, what has been since September of 2020, a monthly webinar on re-ignite.net. Thanks, everyone.
Bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
God
Bye
bless.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.